What does model railroading mean to you? Hi, I'm Michael Gross. Welcome to the workshop at Model Railroader magazine. For me, it's memories of the speeding locomotive passing through town, the familiar sound of steel wheels dancing down the tracks, whistles in the distance, or the friendly wave of the conductor as the caboose passes by. For over 60 years, model railroading has brought memories to life with scaled versions of our favorite trains and scenery that recalls a bygone era. No wonder model railroading is called the world's greatest hobby. There's a story behind every model railroad. The Madison Central was designed by Jim Hediger for Model Railroader magazine. An earlier version of this layout was built by a youth group for a train show in Madison, Wisconsin. It's an HO scale representation of the short line that served the town and its quarry mining industry in the late 1960s. The Madison Central weaves through the wooded hills and gravel moraines of southern Wisconsin, passing through Lake Mendota before winding its way north into the Baraboo Hills. In a minute, we'll get down to the basics of building a model railroad. We'll start with the bench work. That's the framework that will support our railroad and scenery. Then we'll lay out the track and connect the wiring. Along the way, you'll learn about putting together structures like the gravel plant and these downtown stores. We'll move on to create fantastic scenery, and before you know it, the Madison Central will be making its first trip down the line in your home. Okay, time to get on board. Let's join modeling expert Dick Cecil and learn just how much fun building your own layout can be. The design of the benchwork, or tabletop, calls for a 4x8 sheet of 1/2-inch birch plywood. That's right, we'll keep things simple by constructing our frame entirely from plywood. Birch gets the nod because of its strength and light weight. To make things easier, have the lumberyard rip the sheet into 3-inch, 8-foot strips. Another 4x8, 1/4-inch plywood sheet will lay over the top of the frame for added strength. And you'll need to pick up 2 4x8 sheets of 1-inch thick foam insulation board. Eventually, we'll glue it to the tabletop as a scenery base. The foam will also allow us to cut out the bed for our lake and build hills, but more on that later. We're going to create the frame by dividing the 8-foot length into equal sections. So first we'll need to cut 7 of our plywood strips to 47 inches. Measure and mark the 47 inches from each end of the strip toward the center to preserve the original square ends. The 47 inches plus the 2 1/2-inch widths of the side pieces gives our table the finished width of 48 inches. Use a circular saw with a fine-toothed blade and clamp the wood securely to a sawhorse or bench. Oh, and don't forget your safety glasses. Okay, all your plywood is cut and laid out on the floor, but before we start assembling the frame, we need to mark 2 8-foot strips that will become the sides of our tabletop. Lightly clamp the 2 strips side by side, then measure and mark the strips every 16 inches as shown here. These marks will be our guide for nailing the 47-inch cross pieces. For our next step, you'll need carpenter's glue and trim nails. Trim nails are thinner and will hopefully prevent splitting the plywood. Clamp a 47-inch strip vertically and position an 8-foot strip so the flushed up ends create an L. Glue and nail the corner using 2 nails. Slide the assembly down to the next mark and clamp another 47-inch strip in place. Glue and nail the strip just like the corner, making sure to use the mark to align the joint. Repeat this procedure for the remaining 47-inch cross pieces. When you get to the center, rotate the assembly and continue working toward the end. With all 7 cross pieces in place, turn the assembly over by sliding the second 8-foot strip under the cross pieces and using the strip to lift the open side of the assembly all at once. Start the second side of the frame with the center 47-inch strip. We will be working from the center out to the ends of the frame. Glue and nail this piece completely. Now for a handy little trick. Working from the middle toward the ends of the frame, align and drive a nail partially into the end of each 47-inch strip. Go back and finish gluing and nailing the cross pieces, using the partially driven nails as an easy way to align the joints. Now let's add the 1/4-inch plywood top. Run a bead of glue along the entire frame you've built, including the cross pieces. Then position the top over your frame. This is where a second set of hands is helpful. Use the top to square up the frame. Secure the corners first. Nail the top into place, and that includes your cross pieces. The last thing we want is a bowed tabletop down the road. To make sure you are nailing into the cross pieces, mark their position. Use a straight edge and the marks on the sides of the frame to locate the position of the cross pieces. Well, things are starting to take shape. This tabletop really does come together quite easily with a minimum of elbow grease. Before we move on, make sure the tabletop is laid flat while you allow the glue to dry. Okay, on to the legs. In this step, you'll need an 8-foot 2x2, 8 of our 3-inch plywood strips, 4 T-nuts and threaded leveling feet, 8 1/4 by 2-inch carriage bolts, and 8 matching 1/4-inch washers and lock nuts. We'll end up with 2 interchangeable H-shaped legs that are connected to the frame with nuts and bolts. This makes it a whole lot easier to move your layout and reassemble it. And who doesn't dream about displaying their layout at a train show? Back at the bench, cut 8 of your plywood strips to 40 inches. That'll be the height of your table. You may want to make it slightly shorter if you have children who won't want to miss a clear view of that locomotive chugging down the line. While you're at it, cut 4 8-inch lengths of the 2x2. These will hold the T-nuts and leveling feet at the bottom of our legs. Moving on, glue and nail the legs into L shapes and let them dry. Then glue and nail the 8-inch 2x2s flush to the bottom of each plywood L. Be careful to attach these pieces so that you end up with 2 sets of legs that have the 2x2s on the inside of the L shape, like these. It is helpful to lay out the legs and mark the correct ends before attaching the 2x2s. Now let's drill 1/4-inch holes in the bottom of each 2x2. Tap in your T-nuts and screw in the threaded feet. Once your tabletop is up and running, you'll be glad you installed these nifty little levelers to even out an uncertain rec room floor. To create the finished H-leg assemblies, cut 2 35-inch strips of plywood. These will serve as cross pieces for both sets of legs. Take 2 L-shaped legs, align them, and make a mark 18 inches from the bottom of the legs. This will be the height of the bottom edge of the cross piece. Square up the crosspiece and mark both the top and bottom edges on the legs. With the crosspiece in place, drill the first 1/4 inch bolt hole through both the crosspiece and the leg. Holding the head of the carriage bolt in a vice grip, glue and bolt the pieces together using a washer and lock nut. As you tighten the nut, the carriage bolt will countersink nicely into the leg and release from the vice grip. Making sure the assembly is square, drill the second bolt hole and install the bolt just like the first one. Repeat these steps on the other leg to finish off the first H-leg assembly. After you've completed the second assembly, clamp the two back to back. Mark each leg 1 1/4 inches from the top and 1 1/4 inches from the side. Now drill a 1/4 inch bolt hole through both sets of legs. Drilling the holes through both sets at the same time allows you to use the legs interchangeably on either end of your table. Now we'll return to our tabletop. Turn it upside down so we can attach our leg assemblies. We'll need 4 1/4 by 2 inch carriage bolts with matching wing nuts. Place the H-leg assembly all the way to one side of the frame. Measure the distance from the side of the frame to the leg and slide the assembly back half the distance measured. This will center the leg assembly on the frame. Clamp the assembly and drill a 1/4 inch bolt hole in each leg. Then lock your carriage bolt securely in place with washers and wing nuts. Those legs aren't going anywhere. Before finishing up construction of the benchwork, you'll need 4 48-inch lengths of 1/4 by 1 1/4 inch wood molding, along with 4 1/4 by 2 inch carriage bolts, matching flat washers, lock washers, and wing nuts. These will serve as angle braces on both sides of the table. First, clamp the 4 pieces of 48-inch molding together. Make a mark centered 1 inch from each end and drill your 1/4 inch holes. The next step is to measure 30 inches from the bottom of the legs for placement of the upper end of the braces. Remember, the table is upside down, so measure from the feet toward the tabletop. Drill the hole and loosely bolt the top end of the brace to the leg. Be sure to square the table legs before determining where the lower end of your angle brace will be positioned. Position and mark the lower end of the brace. We'll drill right through the brace on the legs. That way the angle braces will be interchangeable, just like our H-leg assemblies. Now all that's left is to bolt the braces in place using our carriage bolts, flat washers, lock washers, and wing nuts. Re-bolt the angle braces on the inside of the leg assembly so we have a nice finished look to our table. And that's just about it. Now you can turn your bench work over and stand it on its new legs. Admire your handiwork, but not for long. We're going to see the Madison Central start to take shape in the next section. We're going to lay out our track on a 4 by 8 foot sheet of 1 inch foam. This will allow us to cut out our lake bed and create other scenery features. But before we move to the actual track layout, let's talk about the different options in track and ballast available to you. Here's standard snap track. As you can see, it doesn't have an attached road bed or ballast. That's made from beveled cork strips. SnapTrack has been a traditional choice for model railroaders. Another track option is this nifty FlexTrack. As its name implies, FlexTrack bends in any direction you need it to go, so you can easily adapt your layout or make changes down the road with little difficulty. So now let's take a look at our choice, Bachmann EasyTrack. As you can see, the ballast is already attached to the track itself, making for quick, easy installation. Atlas and Kato also offer similar types of track with attached roadbed. Here's a list of the track laying supplies you'll need from Bachmann. There's another advantage to using EasyTrack. Its rails are made of nickel silver, the best choice because the rails won't oxidize, which can affect how electricity is conducted around the track. Now the fun begins. Lay out the pieces of track based on the track plan. Pick a spot and start assembling the track. With EasyTrack, the plastic roadbed will snap together easily, but be careful that the rail joiners make a solid connection. Once the layout is complete, adjust it to its final position on the foam. Have you noticed that the layout of the Madison Central is kidney-shaped? The main line is angled that way to break up the feeling of following the table edges. Little touches like this add realism to the layout. Random shaped corners can then be filled in with wooded hills, a farm, or a rural house. If you're pleased with how your layout looks, mark the edges of your track. This will be your reference later, after we remove the track for gluing. Now that we know where our track is going to be, it's time to draw Lake Mendota onto the foam so we can cut out the lake bed. With everything marked on the foam, we'll take apart the track in larger chunks for easy reassembly when we glue it down. Time to cut some foam. Dick is using a large knife to cut out the shape of our lake. Follow the outline and angle the knife so you create a sloping shoreline to the water. When you're happy with the shape of the lake, reposition the foam and mark the shoreline on the tabletop. Now we can glue the foam to the table. We like to use liquid nails for projects, but you can use any foam-friendly adhesive. Okay, glue away, making sure you glue around the lake bed. Carefully place your 4x8 sheet of foam onto the plywood tabletop. Slide the foam back and forth to spread the glue a little bit. Here, Dick will remove the foam for a few minutes according to the directions for the glue. When putting the foam in its final position, make sure the corners all match up. Details can make all the difference, so take your time. Once the glue is dry and the foam isn't going anywhere, we can start gluing down the track. Using the adhesive, lay a bead of glue along the plastic ridges on the underside of the track. On our Bachmann track, these are where the pieces connect. Follow the marks on the foam and move on to the next section, snapping them securely together. In no time, the Madison Central is in place. On to our power and control system. Before you know it, you'll be powering up your own locomotive. You can place the power pack wherever it's most convenient within your layout. Here we will position it on one of the four corners. For the ultimate in freedom of movement around the track, a tethered throttle is an option you may want to consider. Let's take a look at several power options. A DC power pack is actually very simple, and it's the one often sold in beginner sets. Electrical current flows from the power pack through one of the rails into the motor of the locomotive and back out the other rail, returning to the power pack. This completes the circuit. There's a power switch with your basic on-off settings, a direction switch that will take your train either forward or reverse, and the throttle to control the locomotive's power or speed. Notice that with DC control, any locomotives on the layout move at the same speed in the same direction, even if you turn one of the engines around. So what are we using to power the Madison Central? It's called Digital Command Control, or DCC. Sounds impressive, and it really is. The system we've used here is made by Atlas, but there are more than a half-dozen manufacturers of DCC, most of which are compatible with each other. The way DCC operates is through an electronic decoder inside the locomotive. Think of this as the brains of DCC. The decoder works like an engineer, responding only to the unique signal sent directly to it from the controller. This offers model railroaders great flexibility when they have two or more locomotives operating on the same track. In essence, it provides independent control. For example, you could have several engines all on the same track and command only one of them. Although you only need one DCC controller to start, each engine does require its own controller for fully independent operation. Okay, let's move on to our connections. To do this, we'll simply drill a 1/4 inch hole where the feeder wires exit our track and run them down through the hole. Then we'll drill a second hole next to our controller and run the feeder wires back up. We'll mount the transformer under the table to make things look nice and clean. Connecting the wires from the transformer to the controller is quite simple, as long as you make sure your feeder wires are connected to the correct terminals. Be sure to read the instructions that come with your power and control system. Finally, run the feeder wires from the track to the controller and connect according to the instructions. You're ready to roll. It's time to start bringing our layout to life with structures and later scenery. These are some of the basic tools you will need to work like a pro. We'll be using Walthers kits to build our structures. Practically everything you need is right inside the box, but there are still a few steps to follow to make sure the assembly comes together easily. Okay, the main customer of the Madison Central is the Glacier Gravel Company, so we'll start here. Later on, we'll create a hilly, rocky landscape covered with trees for realism. The business district of the town will be made of Merchants Row kits 1 through 3. 4 other kits will complete our downtown area. These include the Clarksville Depot, Bill's Glass Shop, Don's Shoe Store, and, of course, Adam's Ribs restaurant, where the town gathers for lunch or dinner at the end of a long day. First things first, let's start laying out the parts for the gravel company structure. It's a good idea to check the parts against the list provided to make sure they are all there before you start. Another helpful tip is to mark the part numbers directly on the parts before you remove them from the sprue. Just make sure you number them on the inside of the part so we don't have numbers on the outside of our building. The first step is de-spruing. Most of the component parts come attached to plastic frames and need to be separated. Cut off the pieces with your sprue nippers. Now that the parts have been separated from the plastic framework, the rough edges and flashing need to be removed. We'll do this using a file. This works really well for the long, straight edges of buildings. Like most of us, you probably want to jump ahead and glue the pieces together. But first we want to test fit all the component pieces. Remember, a successful layout is in the details, and test fitting will prevent frustration when gluing. Before we begin gluing, here's a great way to work like a seasoned model railroader. It's as simple as cutting a piece of 2x4, boring holes large enough for your glue bottle and brushes, and cutting a notch for laying down a wet brush. No chance of spilling glue all over with this handy little holder. Okay, we've successfully de-sprued, filed, and test fitted. We're ready for our glue. No secrets here, just take your time, and before you know it, the Glacier Gravel Company takes shape on your workbench. Just remember to follow the directions for each kit you assemble. You know, I almost forgot to talk about paint. So let's jump ahead. Here's a strategy you may want to consider before you glue your structure together. Think about the colors that the building might require. Gluing everything together first makes painting the trim very tedious. After all, you don't want to get that trim color on your main color coat. Instead, paint the trim color before you glue. The result is a finished building that looks like you hired a master painter. Model railroading is all about choices. For paint, the best choice is water-based acrylics. They're safer on you and the environment. Plus, they clean up easily with water, unlike solvent-based paints. A more advanced technique you may want to consider is weathering. There are several ways to produce excellent results. Using chalk is a simple way to get that weathered look. Pick an appropriate earth tone and lightly apply the chalk with a dry brush. A weathered look can also be created through dry brushing. Take a dry brush and dab it sparingly into your paint. Next, wipe almost all the paint off your brush on a dry paper towel or rag. Feather the brush against higher, more pronounced points on your structure to create just a hint of color detail. Whatever method you choose, taking the time to detail your structures will blend them right into the scenery, like they're part of the real world. We're getting closer. You can just about see our train chugging down the line. Next up is our final section covering scenery features. This is where we really get creative, and in the process bring our entire layout together. We'll call on a variety of materials you can get from any hobby shop or home building supply center. We'll show you how to create a lifelike hill out of foam, how to sculpt a rock face and color it. You'll learn how to simulate water, build roads, and plant trees. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. We'll begin at the gravel plant. Since the track roadbed wouldn't be raised at the plant like it is on the main line, Dick is going to build up the foundation for our structure to get an authentic look. That's what model railroading is all about, and scenery is a big part of achieving scale realism. After marking the location of the structure on the foam, we'll cut sheets of cork to size and stack them to the correct height. You can find sheet cork at your local hobby shop. Build up the area marked earlier, and don't forget the area between the spurred tracks. It doesn't have to be perfect because later we'll use plaster to create a nice finished slope around our cork foundation. Before gluing the cork in place, position the structure to make sure everything lines up. Time for the liquid nails for projects and the old caulk gun. Again, we're using an adhesive that is foam friendly. In other words, it won't eat away the foam when applied. While our glue dries, we can move to another part of our layout. The Madison Central plan calls for some rolling hills located near our gravel company. We'll use layers of styrofoam to build our hills, and Dick will start by marking and cutting a paper pattern for the shape of the first hill. There are several varieties of foam board available from your local building supply center, and here we're using the same 1-inch foam we used for our tabletop. In one corner of your sheet, transfer the shape of the pattern to the foam. Here Dick is using a drywall saw to make the cuts. Cut on an angle just like we did for our sloping lake shoreline. After cutting, put the base piece back onto your layout to make sure it fits. That's it. Perfect. Repeat the same steps to cut 2 more layers for our hill, each one patterned on the layer below. Remember to cut each piece from a corner of our foam sheet. That way the edges will align nicely with the corner of the table. Now we'll move to the hill between the main line and the gravel company spur tracks. Create a paper pattern like we did earlier and cut the base layer from the foam sheet. A little trimming may be necessary to get the shape you want. Don't worry, we'll be shaping the hills later, so you don't have to be too precise. It's handy to pin the foam in place as you go. That way you can work on the next layer without readjusting the layer underneath. Our second hill will be only 2 layers high to give the terrain some variety. When the foam is in its final position, mark each layer and remove them from the table. Next up, we're going to glue the pieces to the tabletop. Apply the glue inside the marks and spread the glue with a putty knife. This will speed up the drying process. Also, pin each layer down along the edges while you work on gluing the next layer. For the corner pieces, we have clamped 4 vertical boards to our table to give us an easy way to align each piece. After the glue dries, it's time to start working on the final shape of our hills. This can be done with a variety of tools. Dick is using a rasp, a knife, a wire brush, a sanding block, and the drywall saw. Remove the pins as you trim and shape the foam. Stop when you are happy with the contours of the hill, but leave the rough texture of the foam. This will create a natural feel once we finish our scenery with ground cover. Now we have an attractively carved landform. It'll make a great backdrop for the Glacier Gravel Company. But not before we add more detail, like a rock face in the cut between our hills. Mask the track to protect it because we're going to be using plaster to make our rock face. Mix some casting plaster according to the directions on the package and apply it to the base of the hills with a putty knife. As the plaster starts to set up, work it into a vertical wall. Before the plaster is completely dry, use an X-Acto knife to score the face of the wall both horizontally and vertically. This makes a realistic-looking rock form that will look great once it's painted and we put ground cover on our hills. While our rock face dries, let's build some roads. We'll be using a road building kit from Woodland Scenics. This step is exciting because you really begin to see your layout take shape. Start by placing your completed structures on the table. Determine and mark their final positions on the foam. For Main Street, Dick has measured for 2 lanes of traffic and parking lanes in front of the shops. In HO scale, this comes to about 6 inches. Using a straight edge, draw the roads onto the foam. Dick is marking the road for the gravel company site with dashed lines because this area won't be paved, but it will have a gravel finish. Because of the height of the roadbed on our track, use casting plaster to build up the approaches to the crossings. While we're mixing plaster, now is a good time to create a nice gentle slope to the cork foundation for the gravel plant and the area between the spur tracks. Once the plaster dries on our crossings, we can use the foam tape from our road building kit to create forms for pouring the concrete on Main Street. After mixing the joint compound according to the directions, we added the paint from our kit right into our mixture to create a gray that will look perfect as weathered concrete. Use a straight-edged piece of scrap material to spread the mixture, just like leveling real concrete. Although the road seems thin, it is the correct height for the curbs on Main Street, and it looks much better than painting a road right onto the foam. While the concrete on Main Street cures, it's time to go back to our rock face and add some color. We'll be using acrylic paints right from the tube. Mixing a brown and a yellow creates a color that will look very realistic when ground cover is added to the hills above the rock. After Main Street has dried, pull up the foam tape to reveal a nice clean edge to our road. Now, using the foam tape from the kit, position the forms for our cross street. Mix up another batch of joint compound and pave away. Don't forget that little trick of mixing the paint right into the concrete. On the gravel plant side of Main Street, we are going to let the pavement come to an end so our gravel road can begin. You also want to complete the road outside the main line at the crossings. Next, mask the track around the entire layout. A handy tip here is to use drafting tape rather than masking tape because it pulls off easier when it's time to remove it. Now for one of the most dramatic changes to the layout: ground cover. This is where the styrofoam disappears and a natural landscape comes to life. We'll start with ordinary latex paint and foam turf. A tan color works really well when the foam turf is applied over it. Start by applying a thick coat of paint to an area of the layout. Here we will start with our hill in the corner. Before our paint dries, let's add ground cover to our newly christened hill. That's because our base paint will serve as an adhesive for the ground cover. Ground cover comes in a variety of colors and textures. We'll go with a light green and sprinkle liberally over our wet paint. Following up with a darker shade provides texture and depth to the landscape. Okay, we've got a good layer of turf growing and we'll bond it in place by spraying it with Scenic cement. This dries to a clear, matte finish which really helps our ground cover take root and stay in place. At this point, we can add more foam turf if necessary. Just follow it up with more scenic cement. Here Dick is going to move on to the next section of the layout, the hill inside the main lot. Repeat the process in sections around the layout. Next to the train station, we will add a gravel parking lot. You can find different shades and sizes of gravel at your local hobby shop. Spread a layer over the wet paint and follow it up with a liberal coating of scenic cement. In this section, we'll paint the foam board, but skip the ground cover where our controller will be positioned. In the passing siding, the vegetation won't be quite as lush. This adds variety and realism to our landscape. Behind a row of shops on Main Street, the variety continues when we add an asphalt parking lot. You'll notice we're painting the foam under the structures and roughing in the ground cover. We'll bring the ground cover up to the structures in just a little while. We didn't paint under the train station because that kit comes with a base that will cover the foam. A darker brown cover goes in behind some of the buildings to mix things up a bit. Before we work around the lake bed has to be masked. We want it nice and smooth when we paint it and add water later. Once masked, the ground cover can go right to the water's edge. Amazing what a little foam and a lot of spraying can do. While letting the paint and scenic cement dry, we're going to paint the edges of the foam with our tan latex paint to create a nice finished look. Once the ground cover dries, a sanding block levels our roads and gives a weathered look to the concrete. A black marker and a straight edge do the trick when creating the expansion joints found in the real world. A few freehand strokes give us some cracked concrete that was repaired with tar. When applying the ground cover at the gravel company, a light gray paint works well, so there will be less gravel needed to cover such a large area. When using gravel, remember to be generous with the scenic cement. While the gravel dries, we can paint our lake bed. Black works well to create more depth in the water. Now let's pay attention to detail by bringing the ground cover right up to our structures. After marking the location of the structure with a pencil, we'll create a mask inside the outline of the structure. After applying some scenic cement, we can apply the appropriate ground cover. Finish up with more scenic cement, and when the mask is removed, we have a perfect fit. Continue this procedure around all the structures in the layout. The final touches on the gravel plant extends the gravel under the drive-through parts of the structure. Then Dick brings the gravel right up to the building. When everything dries, the masking can come off the track. We'll have to move the gravel plant to get at the spur tracks there. At this point, you can do final touch-up around the track. What landscape is complete without trees? Trees add realism, depth, and dimension. They establish time of year and region of the country as well. You can build trees from kits, but for a first layout, purchasing finished trees makes the most sense. No matter which type of tree you use, the trunk can be snapped into a base that comes with it. The base can then be glued to the scenery. We are going to take advantage of our foam tabletop by placing the tree directly into the foam. Nip off the bottom of the tree and carefully drill a 1/16 inch hole in the bottom of the trunk. A piece of wire is inserted into the trunk, and we have an easy, realistic-looking way to place trees on our layout. Dick will start by placing some clumps of larger trees around the layout. Smaller trees will fill in and create the variety you see in nature. The great thing about the wire in the bottom of the trunk is that it's easy to move trees to achieve the landscape you like. We're almost done, and the Madison Central looks great. Scale realism is one of the objectives of model railroading, and it can be achieved beautifully even on your first layout. What's a lake without water? Using Woodland Scenic's realistic water, Lake Mendota comes to life. This product is used right out of the bottle. Use a brush to spread the resin, but don't work it too much. It will level out on its own. Notice we clamped a board lined with masking tape to the edge of our table. This will hold our water in place while it dries. We can complete our layout with scale figures and vehicles. It's up to you to decide how to set the scene. Figures and vehicles come in a wide variety of time periods and poses. Your imagination completes the picture, so go ahead and have some fun. We've certainly covered a lot of ground in less than an hour, but there's no hurry. It doesn't really matter whether it takes you 1 week or 6 months to complete the Madison Central. The fun is in the journey. That's what really counts. We hope you've enjoyed your introduction to the world's greatest hobby, and I encourage you to come back to this tape often as your layout takes shape in your own home. Stop by your local hobby shop. Check out an issue of Model Railroader or one of their great how-to books for additional reference. Good luck. Maybe I'll see you down the line. Until then, happy model railroading.
Just getting into training? Model Railroader has been finding the fun in model trains every month for over 65 years. While Classic Toy Trains is the magazine for operators and collectors of toy trains from yesteryear and today.
You may not be working on a real railroad, but you want your models to look and operate just like one. Kato Unitrack gives you just that. A layout that goes together easily, operates reliably, and looks good. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced hobbyist, you'll find Unitrack lets you get to the fun and excitement of model railroading like no other track system, in HO and N scale. Unitrack from Kato, manufacturer of precision railroad models.
At Walthers, we're proud to say welcome to model railroading. Since 1932, we've been helping beginners and experts alike increase their knowledge and enjoyment of this great hobby. Our reference books with thousands of exciting products are your most complete source for what's available in every scale, plus helpful modeling terms, ideas, and tips. Walthers, a leading manufacturer and distributor of model trains and railroad equipment for 70 years. To learn more, visit us on the web at walthers.com. And welcome to model railroading.
Want to know more about the world's greatest track? Discover Atlas. With over 50 years experience in scale model railroading, you're on the right track with Atlas. Our lineup includes HO Code 100, 83 and True Track, N Code 80 and 55, O 3-rail track, diesel locomotives with exquisite detail, structures, rolling stock, and more. For product information, visit our website.
Great railroading adventures begin with Bachmann Easy Track. Bachmann's patented track system snaps together and stays together. Easy Track is simple to use and can be run on any flat surface, from a simple oval on your living room floor to the most realistic professional layout you can imagine. Visit your local hobby retailer and discover for yourself why Bachmann Easy Track is the best-selling track system in the world.
Model Railroader magazine keeps you on the right track for scale model trains every month, while Garden Railways magazine shows you how to take the fun of model trains outdoors.